I don't quite know where to start, if I'm being honest with you. I'm 96 years old. I'm sitting in a care home in Wiltshire. It's a Tuesday afternoon, and the woman in the room next to mine is watching a game show with the volume turned up so loud I can hear every question through the wall. I've got a cup of tea that's gone cold, a window that looks out onto a car park, and a photograph of my 4 grandchildren on the windowsill that nobody's updated since 2019. And I need to tell you something I should have understood 35 years ago, but was too stubborn, too loving, too foolish to see. I was a good mother. I need you to know that first. I wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But I gave that role everything I had. I cooked from scratch every night for 28 years. I drove to every school play, every sports day, every miserable Saturday morning football match in the freezing cold. I ironed school shirts at 6 in the morning. I sat up with sick children through fevers and earaches and all manner of misery. I did what mothers do, what mothers are supposed to do, what I was told by everything around me was the right thing to do. And then I got old, and all of that, all of it, counted for almost nothing. My name is Dorothy, and if you'll give me a few minutes of your time, I want to tell you the truth about what happened to me. Because I think a lot of people are heading down the same road I went down. And I'd rather you heard it from someone who's lived it than find out for yourself when it's too late to change anything. My husband Gerald died in 2001. We'd been married for 53 years. He was a quiet man, Gerald, a civil engineer. He didn't say a great deal, but when he did speak, it was worth hearing. We had a house in Marlborough, a proper house, 3 bedrooms, a study, a kitchen big enough to eat in. We'd bought it in 1971 for what seems like nothing now, and by the time Gerald died, it was worth somewhere around £280,000. The mortgage had been paid off for years. It was ours, completely, legally, simply ours. I want you to understand what that house meant. It wasn't just bricks and mortar. Every room in that house had a story. The kitchen where I taught my daughter Helen to make pastry. The back bedroom where my youngest Peter built model aeroplanes for a decade and left glue marks on every surface. The garden Gerald had tended so carefully, where we'd had birthday parties and Christmas afternoons and ordinary Sunday lunches that seemed boring at the time, but that I would give anything now to have back. That house was my history, my security, my home. Within 2 years of Gerald dying, I'd been persuaded to sell it. I'm not going to pretend it happened all at once, because it didn't. It was gradual, soft, gentle even. That's the thing that gets me, looking back. Nobody forced me into anything. My children, Helen, Robert, and Peter, they were worried about me. I believe that. At the beginning, I genuinely believed the worry was real. Helen started coming round more after Gerald died, which was lovely. I was lonely. I was grieving. I was 73 years old and learning how to be alone for the first time in half a century. Having her there, drinking tea at my kitchen table, felt like a lifeline. But the conversations, they always bent the same way. Mom, this house is too big for one person. Mom, what if you fell and nobody was nearby? Mom, the heating bills must be astronomical. Mom, wouldn't it be easier to be somewhere smaller, somewhere more manageable? I heard it so many times that I started to believe it. That's the thing about being told something repeatedly by people you trust. Eventually it starts to sound like common sense. Eventually it starts to sound like your own idea. Robert sat me down one Sunday. He'd driven all the way from Bristol, which was unusual enough. He had a spreadsheet, an actual printed spreadsheet with columns and figures and projections. He showed me what the house was worth, what it cost to run, what my pension amounted to, what care could cost in later life. He was very calm, very reasonable. He said, "Mom, if you sell now, you'll have financial security. You can split the proceeds between us and we can all look after you together. You won't have to worry about a thing. Won't have to worry about a thing." I held on to that phrase like it was a promise, a contract, a guarantee. I should have asked him to put it in writing. I should have asked a solicitor. I should have asked anybody with no stake in the outcome what they thought. But I didn't, because they were my children, and you don't do that with your children. You trust your children. The house sold in 2003 for £295,000. After fees and bits and pieces, there was £281,000 to divide. I kept £15,000 for myself. The rest, £266,000, I split between the three of them, roughly £88,000 each. Robert used his to extend his house in Bristol. He's got a beautiful kitchen extension now, bifold doors, the whole thing. Helen bought a holiday cottage in Cornwall. Peter, who'd always been a bit careless with money, paid off his debts and bought a car and went on a holiday to Thailand. Within 2 years, his share was mostly gone. And me? I moved into a flat in Devizes, ground floor, which I was grateful for. 1 bedroom, a small sitting room, a kitchen the size of a cupboard. The rent was £850 a month. Helen had mentioned at one point that I might come and live with her. She had a spare room. She'd said, "We'd love to have you, Mum." But by the time the house sold, the conversation had shifted. She was very apologetic. Her husband wasn't keen. The children were at difficult ages. The spare room was actually being used for storage. It just wasn't the right time. I said I understood. I did understand. But I also understood quietly, somewhere I didn't want to look too directly, that something had changed. I lived in that flat for 7 years. 7 years of watching my savings, that £15,000, disappear. Nearly £10,000 a year just for rent. On top of that, council tax, utilities, food, prescriptions, the occasional taxi when the bus didn't come and my knees were too bad to walk. My children visited. At Christmas, reliably. At Easter, mostly. Birthdays sometimes. There were phone calls every few weeks, though they got shorter as the years went on. I learned not to mention if I was struggling, because it made them uncomfortable. And when they were uncomfortable, the calls got even shorter. In 2008, I rang Robert and told him I was worried about money. He was sympathetic. He said he'd see what he could do. He transferred me £2,000 3 weeks later with a note saying, "For emergencies, Mum, thinking of you." And that was that. By 2010, the £15,000 was gone. Not wasted. I want to be clear about that. I didn't spend it on anything foolish. I just lived. 7 years of living cost exactly what 7 years of living costs. I was 82 years old. I had £400 in a bank account, and I couldn't pay the following month's rent. I rang Helen first. She was sympathetic. She said it was a difficult time. Her husband had been made redundant the previous year. They were watching every penny. She was so sorry. She really was. She said to try the council. She said she'd done some research, and there were apparently very nice council-funded care options these days. I rang Robert. He said he'd think about it. I'm still waiting. I rang Peter. He didn't answer. He texted the next day to say he was going through some things and would call when he could. That was April 2010. He called in October. I ended up in a council-assisted care home in 2011. This one, where I still am 15 years later. Sycamore Lodge. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about whether the name fits. I want to pause here, because I can tell you what happened, and I can tell you the facts and the figures. But what I really want to try to explain is what it feels like, because that's the part nobody prepares you for. The loneliness isn't what I expected. I thought loneliness would be quiet. I thought it would be an absence. But it's not. It's a presence. It sits with you. It's there when you wake up at 3 in the morning and there's nobody to tell that you can't sleep. It's there when something funny happens on the television and you laugh and then realize there's nobody to share it with. It's there on your birthday when the card from your daughter has clearly been bought at a petrol station and signed in 30 seconds. The hardest part, and I mean this, the hardest part is not being angry with them, because I can see it now clearly, the way it happened, the way I set it in motion without realizing. I raised children who understood, on some deep level, that Mom's job was to give. That's what I modeled for them, every day, for decades. I put myself last so consistently and so completely that they absorbed it as the natural order of things. Of course, Mom comes last. Of course, Mom's needs are secondary. Of course, Mom will manage. I taught them that, not in words, but in actions, day after day, year after year. The selflessness I was so proud of, that was the thing that undid me. I'm not bitter. I want to say that clearly because I think people expect bitterness, and I understand why. But bitterness takes energy, and I haven't got much of that left. What I have is clarity, a kind of horrible, peaceful clarity that comes, I think, from being very near the end of something and being able to see the whole shape of it. What I should have done was keep the house. That's it. That's the whole thing. I should have kept the house, lived in it, and refused to be made to feel guilty about that. I could have taken in a lodger if the bills were too much. I could have downsized by choice, on my own terms, to something smaller and cheaper and still mine. I could have made arrangements that protected me, a proper solicitor-drafted agreement, a trust, any number of things that would have ensured that no matter what happened, I had somewhere to live and the means to pay for care when I needed it. I had £295,000 worth of security sitting in that house, and I gave it away because I was afraid of seeming selfish. There is nothing selfish about protecting yourself. Nothing. I need you to hear that. Your children, if they're good children truly, would not want you to impoverish yourself for them. They wouldn't want to know years later that Mom had nothing because she gave it all away. The children who pressure you, who make you feel guilty for holding on, who imply that it's somehow unreasonable to want financial security in your 80s. Those children are telling you something important. Listen to what they're telling you. There's a woman down the corridor from me. Edna, her name is. She's 91 and sharp as a tack, and she still owns her house. She let it to a young couple, very reasonably, and the income pays for extras that the council doesn't cover. A good hairdresser, the newspaper she likes, occasional trips out with the care home's minibus. More importantly, her daughter rings every single day, visits every week, sometimes twice. The daughter knows, you see. She knows the house is Edna's. She knows her mother still has something to leave. And maybe that makes a difference. Maybe it shouldn't, but maybe it does. I'm not saying your children only love you for what you can leave them. I'm not that cynical, but I'm saying that independence and assets and the power to make your own choices, these things affect how you're treated. They just do. That's not a pleasant truth, but it is the truth. When you have nothing, you depend entirely on other people's goodness. And goodness, even the genuine kind, has limits. It gets tired. It has its own pressures. It looks at its diary and its mortgage and its own children's school fees, and it thinks, I'll go next weekend instead. Keep your power. Keep your choices. Keep your independence for as long as you possibly can. My granddaughter came last month. Sophie, she's Robert's youngest, 24 years old, just started her first proper job. She brought flowers, real ones, not petrol station ones, and she sat with me for nearly 2 hours. She held my hand. She didn't look at her phone once. She asked me if I was all right, and I said yes, of course, because that's what I always say. And then she looked at me for a moment, and she said, Grandma, are you actually all right? You can tell me. And I thought, well, there it is. There's a person asking me the real question. So I told her, not everything, not all of this, but some of it. And she listened. She actually listened. She didn't get defensive or make excuses for her father. She just listened. At the end, she squeezed my hand and said she was sorry, that she wished she'd known, that she wished she'd been older and able to say something at the time. I told her, the past is fixed, but the future isn't. I told her, hold on to what you have. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. Love your family without diminishing yourself for them. She said she'd remember that. I hope she does. I've got, the doctor tells me, perhaps a year. My heart is tired, which seems right somehow. It's worked very hard. I'm not frightened of dying. I've had 96 years, which is more than many people get. And I've seen so much. The end of the war, the moon, landing, 3 monarchs, all 4 of my grandchildren born. I've done things that mattered. I've loved people deeply. That's not nothing. What I'm sad about, and it sits differently to fear, what I'm sad about is that the last chapter of this story is a lonely one, that it didn't have to be this way, and that somewhere out there, right now, there are women my age, and men too, sitting at kitchen tables with their children, being gently persuaded to sign things, to give things away, to trust that it'll all be fine. And nobody is telling them what I'm telling you now. So I'm telling you, if you've listened this far, thank you. Genuinely, from the bottom of my old tired heart. You've given me your time, and that means more than I can say. Remember, be generous, yes. Be loving, yes. But never give away the thing that keeps you free. Keep the house. Keep the money. Keep the power to say no, and come visit your mother, not at Christmas, on a Tuesday, for no reason, Just to sit with her and ask how she really is. That's all. That's everything. Now then, tell me something. How old are you? And where in the world are you hearing this from? I'd love to think of you somewhere. A kitchen, a car, a park bench at lunchtime. I'd love to think my voice has traveled. It would mean a great deal to this old woman to know someone's listening. Take care of yourself, my dear. Take very good care.